Excellent. It shows that we're live on YouTube. It does show that we're live on Facebook. I always like to double check Facebook in the event that it's lying to me and we're not actually live. It's not actually failed me yet, but we never know. Excellent. Shows that we're live. And for everyone that's on here, just go ahead and give us a thumbs up and let us know you can see us, you can hear us fine. It looks like our board chair, Brian Dice, is on here with us. Hello to you, Brian. Hello to Melissa and Vanessa DeMont. I do not want to take up too much time because we have a wonderful broadcast that's planned out. And know that today's broadcast is a little bit atypical outside of what we've been doing over the last several weeks. As you all are aware, we have daily broadcasts that are designed to help our businesses educate you on all things COVID, but in a time when there are other things that are transpiring, uncertainty and things of that nature, we try and leverage some of our partners. So today's broadcast does feature our Adams and Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. You will have time to be asking questions. So as they are both speaking, please feel free to put in any questions or comments in the comment section of this video broadcast. I am delighted to share with you that I'm Juliette Abdel, President and CEO for the Westminster Chamber. Please like this page, follow it for future updates. Now, today's presentation will be moderated by Wayne Anderson. Wayne is a longtime member of the Westminster Chamber. He has lived in and around the area from Broomfield, serving in office there, and then coming over to Westminster, where he really made it his home with his business and now serves on our board of directors. Wayne Anderson is our moderator, and I'll have him kick it off. I'll be in the background, so if you guys have any questions or comments, please drop them in.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And thanks, Sheriff Strada. Well, that's not easy to say. Thanks, Sheriff Reichenborn. So what I'd like to do is kick it off and have, in alphabetical order, have Adco Sheriff Reichenborn. Did I get it right? Okay.
Yes.
To give us some background on what's going on in Adams County.
Well, as you know, Adams County is very diverse, and we've been extremely busy with the COVID stuff that's around in Adams County. And as you know, some of those populations, such as Commerce City and those areas, are typical COVID hotspots. And so early on in this COVID epidemic, we had to really sit back and think about what we were doing at our jail and what we were going to do. And so early on, I decided that we were going to work with the DA's office, and we were going to see if we could release inmates that had pretty much completed the vast majority of their sentences, 3/4 of their sentences, and see if we could release those inmates and try and keep them healthy. And so working with the DA here in Adams County, Dave Young, we were able to get that accomplished. And not everybody got released that met that criteria that we set, because quite frankly, some of those folks probably need to stay in jail just a little bit longer to ensure the safety of the public. And then we implemented another part in our jail where we started quarantining every inmate, every new arrest that came in for 14 days. And over time, we found that 10 days was quite ample to quarantine those folks and keep them out of general population. And so we've done really well at Adams County. We've only had 4 COVID cases that I'm aware of through the inmates. And 2 of those were because of brand new arrests that needed to be made mandatory arrests because of victims' rights. And so 2 inmates that were already in custody prior to us going into our COVID exposure, and 2 additional. So that's worked out really well. We early on also started getting reports from Tri-County Health so that we could kind of monitor which houses we need to really pay attention to when we were responding to unattended deaths and some of those other COVID-related things, because we didn't have the appropriate PPE and we couldn't get the proper protective equipment. And so it was pretty imperative that we had that information so that we dealt with those situations just a little bit different. And I don't know if people have realized it, but over the past week or so, we released a statement saying we're not gathering that information anymore. We're treating pretty much everything as it is COVID positive, and we've got the ample PPE that we need. And then, of course, the stuff that happened in Minnesota has happened with Floyd. And, you know, it's heartbreaking to see human life pass away in the middle of the street like that. And I wonder often, is that a training issue, or was that just simply some officers that flat didn't care? And so that's part of what the process of the criminal process is to figure out which that was. My take on it, just watching it, is there was an extreme lack of training there. There were numerous signals that were there that had the officers been paying just a little bit of attention, they should have seen that he was in a respiratory distress and started making some appropriate action. That was my feeling. And I taught arrest control for over 20 years. I was an instructor trainer, which meant I trained the instructors. And so I'm pretty confident when I say that I think there were some ample signals given that had folks been paying attention, they would have seen that. And it's just heartbreaking anytime you see any individual pass away like that. That's always somebody's brother, somebody's sister, somebody's mother or father, and it's absolutely somebody's child then. And it's somebody's everything. And so it is absolutely heartbreaking to watch somebody pass away. So I think I probably used most of my 10 minutes right there.
And actually, you have about 5 minutes more.
Okay. Well, I don't know what else you would like me to say. You know, we're doing everything we can here in Adams County to make sure that our citizens are very well taken care of. We're trying to do everything very thoughtful and methodical, and being aware of the indifferences that are currently out there. We know that not everybody thinks the same way, and we're trying to be respectful of that and respectful of every individual, because here in Adams County, we have a very diverse ethnicity here. So it's really, for me, it's pretty important that our officers in all of our dealings are being as respectful as they can be. And, you know, so that's what we instilled from the day one when I came in here, was treat people the way you want to be treated, talk to them the way that you want to be talked to, be respectful of people. And we're finding that's working a whole lot better. I know that I saw some of those hashtags 8 can't wait. And so I looked up to see what those 8 things were. And it's kind of crazy, but I look around the Denver metro area and I go, I think the vast majority of the law enforcement here in Colorado already follows the 8 things that are being asked for. So the 8 can't wait is pretty much already being done. And I've tasked my undersheriff with making sure, if we're not doing one of those, if we're not doing one of those, what are we missing and what can we do to hit that mark? But I can tell you that on the surface of it, when I was looking those over, it absolutely looks like we're already hitting all of those marks. We're already giving the verbal commands before we shoot. We let people know that that's going to happen. We already have a use of force continuum. We already have a use of force documentation that anytime any force is used other than verbal, that there's some documentation to that, because that helps us look at that in advances if we have an officer that continuously uses too much force. So we're gathering that information on our officers early on to see, is this person building a pattern of excessive force or always resorting to force? And we take a look at all of that stuff. So I think when we look at that 8 can't wait, I think you'll find that probably the majority of the Denver metro and probably the entire state are already following those requests. So it makes it a whole lot easier when we think about that we've already hit those, because we're meeting the standard and have been for quite some time.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you said that, because in previous positions and in some of the things I do today, I work with the law enforcement, and I had the same response. It's like, wait a second, this is the kinds of things that we had done already. So
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, it's never a good idea to shoot into a moving vehicle. We know that. That's one of the 8 can't wait things, is don't shoot into a moving vehicle. Well, we know that if the vehicle's moving and we shoot into it, you know, that's 4,000 to 8,000 pounds that's rolling around uncontrolled. And so I think statewide, that's pretty much a standard. We just don't do that stuff. And so it's it's very reassuring to know that, hey, people are asking for stuff and we're already there. We're in front of that ball and have been for quite some time. And I can tell you that I've worked with Sheriff Schrader before I made sheriff, and I helped teach at one of their academies, and that's absolutely some of the stuff that's in their curriculum. So I know that Sheriff Schrader and his academy staff have been teaching that stuff really early on, the de-escalation techniques and all of that stuff. So I think you'll find that the majority of the law enforcement around is already on top of the ball, and they're trying to make all of those things already, if they're not 100% already done.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's see. We have some feedback we're getting here from Richard Chamberlain. Okay, thank you for being here today and for everything you all do to support the community. And by the way, I definitely echo that. Again, having worked very closely with the law enforcement in a number of the different Colorado cities, you guys are amazing to me. Okay, Sheriff Schrader, would you like to talk to us about?
Good morning, Wayne. Thank you for having me on. Good morning, Rick. Good to see you again. Obviously, throughout the Denver metro area and throughout the country, law enforcement has been very busy with many things this year. Jefferson County, we kind of started off the year with a budget challenge that required the closing of a floor of the county jail. Shortly after that, the COVID crisis hits, and we are dealing with the effects of that and managing it. And as Sheriff Reigenborn indicated in his comments, at the very early side of that COVID crisis, we were struggling in public safety with having sufficient PPE. We were struggling with other things, testing on the front end to make sure that our first responders, along with those critical health workers, were getting tested. And those things were very frustrating on the front end. And then the unknown, the fear factor that not only was being felt in the community, but perhaps in the areas where we have people who had to respond into places where conditions unknown would be. I wish I could say we had as low of a number of people who've been impacted by COVID in our Jefferson County jail and in our staff as has been in Adams County. COVID, the reality of it is once it hits in those closely confined living quarters, like a nursing home, like a county jail or a correctional facility, and I think that a correctional facility has the greatest opportunity because of that confined area for a quick spread. We've seen that. We've had those similar processes in place, and this is a slippery virus. It's a difficult to contain disease because now there have been some instances where exposures have been made after somebody's been isolated for 14 days, and we just try to get our arms around those things. Nonetheless, we progress with those. It is, I believe, healthy that in the community we're starting to see some relax and the opportunity to get back to normal. And that's what we're there to support. The proper role of government is to protect the rights of the individual, to protect rights so that we can all enjoy the freedoms that we have. And that informs policy that we set within law enforcement, specifically in the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department, and how we move forward with the day-to-day things that are going to come up. It helps inform during the COVID crisis. Obviously, a public health crisis and law enforcement, public safety is there to support public health organizations to make sure that people are safe and healthy, and also enjoy the freedoms that they should be enjoying and can be enjoying in spite of those. Now, immediately after that, or during this crisis, we all unfortunately have to witness via video a homicide, somebody who is getting killed. And George Floyd's murder is something that I think that we have to call that. The unfortunate reality, many unfortunate realities in that, but the fact that a few cops, four in this case, have tarnished the badge throughout the country and caused for a call to reform police so that we don't have other people unnecessarily get killed. For us, this has caused, for me personally, a great deal of introspection of, we do those things. Rick mentioned those things. Sheriff Reigenborn mentioned these things that about the professionalism that we enjoy in law enforcement agencies in the Denver metro area. Several years ago, President Obama's 21 point for policing in the 21 points, I believe, or 20 points of policing in the 21st century came out and caused us to have an opportunity for an examination of how things were. We went through that. We took it step by step to say, are we on target and on track for the things that were in the 21st century policing guide? That was beneficial to do. This event here, because the witness that we all have had to that murder has caused, for me at least, an even deeper introspection of how we can identify and root out bias, whether it's race or to any other walk of life. That we need to make sure that we identify those things and that we fulfill our mission, and that's just to protect people, protect their rights, and make our communities as safe as they can for all people to live, learn, work, and play. I talked about that overarching view that the proper role of government is to protect the rights of the individual. Moving forward, and some of the requests, one of the questions that has come to me is why do you send people to Denver to provide support to the Denver Police Department as these protests are going on? Well, it's for that same overarching reason that we do that. We want to protect the rights of people to speak their mind, even if they're angry. And I understand the anger in this circumstance, and we all should take a look at that and say, what can we do better as we listen to those voices? But the people who have conducted themselves in criminal activity, harming other people, breaking windows of business, tagging ultra hateful things, are things that we should not tolerate, and we need to provide support, but we need to be there on the front line to protect the rights of the individual to speak. The First Amendment of what we all enjoy, our right to speak, and the necessity of government to hear those things. Moving forward, there has been a call and a bill that has been introduced into legislation. Senate Bill 2217 has been introduced this week, and there was much, and I see the question come up about the perspective on police accountability in this legislation. And the writer Lynn there says that they do support the legislation. There are many aspects of that legislation that I do support, and the intent of it I do support. That it is necessary to look inward. There are some things that I do have concern with, and one of the things in the initial draft was that state agencies were excluded. State agencies were excluded from wearing body cams, and local law enforcement would be required when this bill passes to have body cameras. We already wear body cameras. I support that. I think it's the right and righteous thing to do to protect people. Also protects the officers who wear them, from unfounded complaints. And I see another question that comes up, and I am speaking about that right now, Sean, about Senate Bill 217. It is a disingenuous effort if state law enforcement agencies are excluded from that bill. And there hasn't really been a talked about reason why state agencies would be excluded, but it's probably fiscal. Well, the same fiscal issue hits local county governments. It hits municipal governments as well. And this is one that if we're going to have reform, let's do it the right and righteous way. Again, I believe that there is good cause for having that conversation. I am concerned that having the conversation crammed into a 2-week period in a rushed manner is not going to produce the best law. And in my position, and we have posted my position on the Jefferson County Sheriff's Facebook and social media, and I believe our website as well, and it can be found there. I'm calling on Governor Polis to initiate and require a special session be held on this topic. This is that important. What happened there is that important, and we need to move forward in a thoughtful manner, and we do need to implement some of those reforms, and we need to do it appropriately and thoughtfully. Wayne, I see you turned your microphone on. I think that's a hint that it's time for me to mute mine until there's a question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sheriff Schrader. And that bill is one that, we can spend a whole session on just that bill. So, I would like to get to some of the other questions that people have. By the way, thank you both. That was very, very insightful information. And it's interesting to get a look from the other side because we don't normally see that side of it. So I really appreciate that. So Sheriff Reigenborn, are a body of worn cameras mandatory for all Adams County Sheriff deputies and patrol personnel?
Hey, Sean, great question. We currently don't have any body cameras. And so that's something that when we first came into office, we started exploring, and we have been trying to find the right vendor that can get us a camera that'll do the functions that we want to do, that'll have the ability that when our jail staff has that camera on, that it'll record for the full 12 hours, or our patrol deputies, that it'll record for the full 10 hours that the patrol officers are working. And so we haven't been able to locate a vendor yet that can provide that, or provide us an easy way to easily charge those devices while they're in our cars, or while they're in our while our deputies are working in the jail, meaning a quick battery swap or something of that nature. So we've looked at it, we're looking at it again, and we have been, and it's we're trying to find the right vendor to come in and get that done. I think it's a great idea because like Sheriff Schrader said, it protects everybody, and I think that's that part that it's important. But I wanted to kind of talk about that HR bill that Sheriff Schrader was talking about, and some of it that gives me concern is all videos must be released within 14 days, unedited. And so that's one of the things that kind of causes me some concerns, because sometimes we have witnesses that probably would not come forward and assist us in a case if they knew that their identity could be given that easily. And so that if we had a witness to a crime, it's imperative that we protect them as well sometimes, or they won't come forward with the information. And it may be the homicide that we cannot solve, or the sex assault on a child. And when you start talking about every officer must wear a body camera, what about when we're doing the not the prostitution stings, but the human trafficking that goes on, and those folks that get pulled into that? We would have to release all of that information before the case was even ready to be filed, and victimize some of those folks again, or the female or male that was sexually assaulted in the hospital and having to give the gory details, but all of that stuff would have to be released within 14 days. Or you could even go as far as the traffic accidents that we respond to, where it's serious injuries and sometimes involving small children or infants. And all of that stuff would be released without any editing within 14 days. And I think that's why I agree with Sheriff Schrader. Polis has to really get this together, because some of that stuff can be fairly gruesome, and I don't know that everybody would use the information the appropriate way.
Yeah,
Wayne, if I could add on to that a little bit, and I totally agree with those points. There are significant privacy issues with cameras, and putting officers in who might be in undercover capacities in those human trafficking type things could be detrimental to the safety of the officer. The requirement in the draft bill right now is that all detention deputies would have to wear cameras. We have cameras throughout the jail already that record what goes on. Cameras record behavior, and it certainly would provide an additional perspective. But there are people who are booked into the jail who go through strip searches, and the requirement to wear a body camera all the time and that information be available, there are substantial privacy issues that individuals should have. There needs to be thoughtful aspects to this legislation.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the input. This is obviously a hot topic. Let's see. Let me see if we have any other questions from anyone. Sean, thank you very much for your questions. Okay, we have one from Richard Chamberlain. Glad to hear that we've implemented the reforms you both mentioned. What further improvements do you imagine coming ahead?
There are some things that are identified in the legislation and other legislation. One of the things that law enforcement easily gets behind, and I'll mention two, but this first one is not only a duty to report, but a duty to intervene. If there is observed somebody using excessive force and there's an officer who is there, they have a duty to intervene. And if they don't, they should be prosecuted. I certainly agree with that. That is an appropriate reform. And then also, again, going back to the body cameras, I think that is a good policy and practice. When we implemented our body camera program, we didn't only look internally. We didn't only look to the vendors to say, here's what the system can do. When we crafted our policy, we looked at guidance from places like the ACLU in terms of what would be appropriate in protecting people's privacy. Our policy was formed around those things. Also, if I could respond about what other reforms, some of it is internal. What are the processes? And we're doing a deep dive into what are the processes that we utilize in our recruitment, in our hiring, in our training, in our promotions to identify and eliminate the implicit biases that may come up in all of those processes, to make sure that we are hiring applicants that represent our communities, that are going to be interacting. We are doing a deep dive into those. Those aren't going to be legislated. Those are going to be internally led, and they're important. We're going to do them.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. All right, we have another question from Jen Kilpatrick. Hi, all. I know Sheriff Schrader and applaud him for all of what that you do in the community. Wondering how the individual officer paying for claims impacts budget. If officers have to pay, does that reduce the county financial burden? I don't think I understand those financial aspects. Also, if these agencies are doing these great things, why is there opposition to being codified? I'm so happy to have you both use body-worn cameras. Definitely catches criminals in the act on tape. So we have a number of questions built up in this one.
Yeah, I believe the main part of that question goes to an aspect in Senate Bill 217, and that has to do with qualified immunity, and what the bill as originally written would make an officer who is involved in an incident and there is a judgment or a settlement liable for 5% of the judgment or $100,000, whichever is less, but it would be the first money that would be paid. And it doesn't even permit the officer to have insurance for that. It seems overly punitive that somebody couldn't purchase insurance and pay. Counties do that. Governments do that. The state does that. They have insurance policies to protect those kinds of claims, but this bill does not permit an individual to do that. Now, just imagine the case where an officer who is present and he doesn't have things happen that were beyond his control, but he gets named. He may be liable for that. The concern that many of us in leadership in law enforcement have over this is that if that liability is so great, that risk is so great, that we're going to have a problem with retaining the good cops that we have, and we're going to have a problem recruiting good people to be cops in the future. There needs to strike the balance between having appropriate measures and not being overly punitive. One of the requirements in this bill is that if an officer doesn't turn on his body camera, it is presumed misconduct. And now that officer has to play defense and prove their innocence. And the presumed misconduct carries a penalty of $10,000 per incident. It is a very high penalty, and all of those things, if passed as in its current form, would be discouraging to people who are wearing a badge now or who might wear them in the future. And I think it would undermine the quality of law enforcement that we have.
Thank you. Any input from you, Sheriff?
Sheriff Schrader he nailed it. I mean, he absolutely nailed it, because those are all the same concerns that we had as well. So I just, that it's with all of us talking continuously, we all are kind of voicing the same concerns that I don't know how we're going to retain the good officers that we have. We're busy every day, that when we hear somebody that might be a bad one, that we do everything we can to document it and weed them out and make sure that they don't come back. And there's already some state law that's already in place that when an officer lies, they lose their post right away. They can't get it back. It's done. So their certification is over. So I think it's, we've already talked about all that stuff. I see the next comment on there that I mentioned, the 8 can't wait. It's something that most departments are following. Are all 8 required in the law? They're not all required in the law. Some of them, I think, are just common sense stuff that we shouldn't be doing. And I think, quite frankly, some of them are very well needed to give the officers the direction to what force is appropriate and when it's appropriate. So the use of force continuum and the documentation of that force as well.
We can't hear you, Wayne. I'm reading like crazy with my mic muted. Let me start again. So this is from Brian Head, one of our board members. If budget constraints were not an issue, is there anything more that the sheriffs think law enforcement could be doing to prevent deadly use of force? So, for example, non-lethal weapons, body cams, mental health training, civilian responders, etc.
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit that we could be doing if budget constraints weren't there. I would love to have body cameras and cameras in every one of the cars. I think it's important to have both. I think the mental health training is imperative, and I think we should, there's going to come to a point where it would be nice if we had a trained professional on staff that would come to some of those calls that we need. I can tell you that when we're dealing with a suicidal party, I'm not an expert in that field. I can only talk to about what I know. And so it would be very helpful if we had somebody that had that training and could actually come out and help us talk to those people so that they don't hurt themselves. And sometimes it's even the homicide. They're suicidal and they move over to that homicidal part. And so it'd really be important to have that. And then again, there's times that, you know, I raised my kids, they're grown, they've left, and my kids are of age now. It makes it a little harder to talk to some of the younger kids because it's a different time and life. And so it'd be nice if we had some of those folks that had that training and experience that could actually come in and talk to kids and really know how to gather that information from them and make them feel safe and secure. So I think there's a ton of things that we could do if money wasn't an issue.
Thank you for that. And we have from Vanessa, what about privacy of those who are distressed or a mental health crisis? Police are often the first to respond before medics and EMS to assist in those crises.
You know, there are privacy concerns with many individuals that we deal with. Some have been talked about here, and some are just very sensitive circumstances where we, and again, presuming that Senate Bill 217 passes, the requirement to have body cameras on at all times. We're interacting with the public. You know, imagine a family who has lost somebody, and maybe to suicide. So it kind of blends that mental health aspect, and also the sensitivity of a death, and recording that information and then it having to be available. Not that somebody would necessarily request that, but the fact that it might have to be available is a consideration where there needs to be some privacy. A sex assault victim of the same vein, and as Sheriff Reigenborn put it out there a little bit ago, there are witnesses that may not be willing to come forward if privacy can't be maintained. But Vanessa, back to your point about the privacy of those who are suffering from mental health conditions. We all too often are interacting with people with mental health conditions, and we need to be observant that there are medical issues there too, and those privacies need to be respected and maintained.
Any thoughts from you, Sheriff Reigenborn?
No, just the exact same. You know, it's hard for us to get on scene, and we're there first. And as Sheriff Schrader said, you know, some of these people are in a mental health crisis, and we're trying to deal with that. And sometimes they're giving some very intimate details about their medical history and stuff that we need to relay over to the medics and fire personnel, and that's stuff that I don't know that often the general public just doesn't need to know some of that stuff. And there's HIPAA laws to protect that stuff. And, you know, it gets kind of shady there at times as to what do we need to really release to the public. And it's not that we're not trying to be transparent. It's just sometimes some of that stuff just is not somebody else's business.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. So actually, we've run out of time. I need to thank both of you. Thank you, Sheriff Schrader. Thank you, Sheriff Reigenborn. This has been a great session, and I really, really enjoyed listening to the other side, if you will, that we as regular citizens don't see. Now, I know we had a number of questions. Anybody who has given questions that we weren't given answers to, please keep those questions in the comments. We'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. We will pass that on to our sheriffs, and I'm sure they'll be willing to answer them, and we'll get them back so that everybody can see.
Wayne,
So,
thank you for the opportunity to be on, and Juliet, to you as well. I would, and I'm sure Rick will do the same thing, I would direct people to the Jeffco Sheriff's Facebook page, our Twitter account, and our website, because we're putting out a lot of information about all of these topics, about COVID, about the killing of George Floyd, about police reform. And please stay engaged with us. We want to hear from you. And again, I'm sure at jeffco.us/sheriff is where you can get to our webpage.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, we'll make sure that that's on the site as well.
Thank you, Wayne and Juliet. And we're the same. We're posting stuff every day. We're trying to get that information out every day. Send us an email. Send me an email, Sheriff Ragenborn at adcogov.org, and we'll get you answered. Just give us some time. We often get overwhelmed with the vast number of emails that we get on a daily basis, and we try to get to each and every one. And I quite often try and touch each one of those personally. So it's really important for me to try and make sure that you know that I am listening and we're trying to take care of everything that you need.
Great.
Thank you both.
Okay. Any questions that we haven't got to, we will get with the sheriff's offline and get answers to those questions. As it stands, we want to end this. We again appreciate everything. Look forward to some of our other sessions. Oh, thank you, thank you, Brian, and thank you very much, and have a great Friday.